let's take some time to consider how to assess the strength of a planet to see if it's going to be able to give and produce what it's meant to produce within the chart. There's a number of ways to do this, and we're going to keep it fairly basic at this stage. We're going to look at some strengths dealing with Shadbala. Shad means 6, Bala means strength, so the 6 strengths that we need to look at to see if a planet will be able to go in the proper direction that it's meant to. We're not going to look at all of Shadbala because it's fairly detailed mathematically, and it's a little beyond the scope of our video. The next book that hopefully will be out this spring, The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, Volume 2, which is the second one from this book here, Volume 1, we will be looking at Shadbala in detail. There's a full chapter on that. But most computer programs do calculate Shadbala. And most of them that I've seen calculate them in a graph. And Shadbala, we know when a planet is strong when it has enough of these 6 strengths that on the graph it is above 1, meaning that when you look at the graph and it says 1.01 or it says 1.25 or 1.75, that's strong Shadbala. When it's below 1, 0.99, 0.98, 0.95, 0.75, below 1, that's going to show that planet innately has a weakness to it. It doesn't have the capacity to give everything that it promises. And what that means is that if a planet has low Shadbala and it has a lot of negative karma towards it, such as bad logitati of Ashtas, or it's in bad dignity or in a difficult house, then we have a planet that's a weak system essentially with bad karma. So when you have weak system and bad karma, there's more likelihood that difficulty can arise. If you have a planet with high Shadbala, high strength, and bad karma against it, it has more capacity to resist that karma. So that can be like a strong person getting attacked but surviving. Whereas low Shadbala can be a weak person getting attacked and getting severely hurt. But again, this is where the whole analysis of the chart is necessary, because you can have a planet with weak Shadbala and maybe there's no negative karma towards it. Maybe it's in good dignity. Maybe it has a lot of support from its friends, the logitati of Ashtas, and so it might be weak, but there's nothing hurting it. So that's a weak person who goes through life and never gets in any kind of trouble at all. So we don't have to worry about that. But this is a good gauge to see what is the innate quality of the planet that we're looking at. And when we go over the planets and what they mean specifically, their karakas, their indications, we're going to do that for each of the planets, this next series of videos, about 9 videos. You will get a sense of if the Shadbala is adequate, then those things the planet represents will have more capacity to produce the good parts of the planet, or with the planet, the innate, concrete specifics of the planet. Now, before we do that, we want to look at some things that you can see on your own to just get a general assessment of how a planet might be, just in case you don't have a computer program that calculates Shadbala, and you need to just look at a chart and get an idea of what's going on. Well, first of all, I want to start with a quote from Saravali. And this deals with the gender of the planets. If we know the gender of the planets, we can know what kind of sign do they do best in. Now, Saravali says that male planets are considered stronger when in odd signs during the fortnight of the waxing moon. What that means is that if you look at a chart and the moon is waxing, meaning it's moving away from the sun, then the male planet will be stronger. Male planets are also stronger during the daytime. Female planets are considered strong when in even signs during the fortnight of the waning moon and at night. Now, what's the waning moon? That's after you see the sun. Let's take a look here. If the sun is here, let's pretend for a moment that Saturn is the moon. So if we have the sun and then the moon's down here, when the moon is 7 houses away from the sun, it's full. So as the sun is, the moon is full when it's 7 houses away from the sun. So as the moon moves away from that sun and starts moving towards the 7th house from the sun, it's waxing, so it's getting stronger. When the moon is here in the 7th and it's going around back towards the sun, then it's waning. So that's how you can tell the difference between a waning and a waxing moon. So let me reread that. Male planets are considered stronger when in odd signs, during the fortnight of the waxing moon and during the daytime. Female planets are considered strong when in even signs, during the fortnight of the waning moon and at night. Now, what are the masculine, feminine, and neutral planets? Well, Sun, Moon, and Mars, Sun, Jupiter, and Mars, these are the masculine planets. Moon and Venus, these are the feminine planets. Mercury and Saturn are considered neutral. So once more, Sun, Mars, and Jupiter are masculine. Moon and Venus are feminine. And Mercury and Saturn are considered neutral. What that means is that when Sun, Mars, and Jupiter are in odd signs, what are odd signs? But Aries, Gemini, Leo, and so on around, they'll just have naturally more capacity to assert their nature, their assertive masculine nature. They'll do better in that regard. When Moon and Venus are in even signs, and even signs are Taurus, Cancer, Gemini, Scorpio, and so on, so the even signs, they will do better innately. So their innate, receptive, comforting nature will come out better. It will function better. Same thing with Sun, Mars, and Jupiter. When they're in an odd sign, their capacity to do and achieve and accomplish will be stronger. And it won't be because of overcompensation or trying to prove themselves. They'll just have a better sense of being able to do it. And Mercury and Saturn are considered neutral. Now, this is important not just for the strength of the planets, but also when you start getting into prajna and you're trying to identify certain who stole what, or what kind of person is involved. Later on, it'll make a little more sense to understand the gender of the planets for more specifics. But write this down. It's important to note. Now, the other part of planetary strength that I want to look at today deals with a variation or an aspect of Shadbala, again, the 6 strengths that we talked about. And the primary ones I want to look at are Uchchabala, which is based on the placement of the planets in regards to their exaltation position. The closer they are to their exaltation position, the stronger they are, the better their Uchchabala will be. We want to look at the Shadbala, and that's based on a planet's retrograde status. How close is it to the Earth? The closer a planet is to the Earth, and the more retrograde it is, the stronger its Shadbala. Kendrabala is based on if a planet is in an angle. Planets in angles actually do well because angles are houses that deal with activity. And what are the angles? But 1, 4, 7, and 10. And planets in angles have better capacity to take initiative to accomplish their goals. We want to look at Digbala, which is directional strength. Every planet does well in a particular part of the chart. And once you can start to memorize this and see this, then you can look at a chart and say, okay, this planet has directional strength, or this planet has high Shadbala or high Uchchabala, which can help you get a sense of, is this planet going to be able to do well what it's meant to do based on its innate qualities. And it's also important to note that the Uchchabala and Shadbala are what we use to calculate Ishta and Kashta. And Ishta and Kashta, Ishta is a planet's capacity for good. Kashta is the planet's capacity for bad, ill, which means a planet that has higher Ishta will give more, do better, be more successful in a positive way, and help other planets in a positive way if it's a benefic. And a planet that has high Kashta will hurt other planets more, or won't be able to give as much good, essentially. So let's go ahead and start with the Uchchabala. And here on this chart to the side, I've just made this to look like where all the planets are in their exaltation position. And this is a totally unrealistic chart because, number one, we can't have Mercury this far away from the Sun. It just never happens. Physically impossible. So you can't always have the planets exalted all at once. So now that we have that, this is just simply the exaltation positions. So the Sun is exalted at 10 degrees of Aries. And again, all of this is covered in the Art and Science of Vedic Astrology on page 63. 10 degrees of Aries, which means as the sun is moving away from debilitation at 10 degrees of Libra and moving towards 10 degrees of Aries, it's gaining Uchchabala. At 10 degrees of Aries, it has a total of 60 points of Uchchabala. The point system goes to 60. As it moves away from Aries and moves down towards 10 degrees of Libra, its debilitation point, it's losing points until it gets down to 0 in Libra. And all of the planets work this way. The moon gets full Uchchabala at 3 degrees of Taurus. Jupiter gets full Uchchabala at 5 degrees of Cancer. Mercury gets full Uchchabala at 15 degrees of Virgo. Saturn gets full Uchchabala at 20 degrees of Libra. Mars has full Uchchabala at 28 degrees of Capricorn. And Venus has full Uchchabala at 27 degrees of Pisces. And directly opposite all of their positions, that's where their point of debilitation is. So debilitation, exact degree, 0 Uchchabala. Exaltation, exact degree, full Uchchabala. And this starts to speak to the idea of retrograde planets. And a lot of people say that when a planet is retrograde but debilitated, that cancels out the debilitation. Well, it doesn't really cancel it out. What's happening there is that the planet at debilitation has 0 Uchchabala, but when it's retrograde, it can have up to 60, close to it, points of Shadbala. And it's the Uchchabala plus the Shadbala divided in 2, which gives us a planet's Ishta, or its good percentage. Which means that if we have a planet at perfect exaltation, 60 degrees of Uchchabala, and it's as retrograde as it can get, 60 points of Shadbala. So that would equal 120. We divide that by 2, we get 60. There we have 60 points of Ishta, which means that that planet is more than likely going to do very, very good for the things that planet rules. If it's Jupiter, it's going to provide a spouse, children, wealth. If it's Saturn, it's going to give a good, strong immune system, good longevity. If it's Venus, it'll provide vehicles. And all this we'll go over when we look at each planet individually. But this is how it works. Now let's pretend that we have a planet, let's say Saturn, at 20 degrees of Aries. And that's going to show that that planet, Saturn, has 0 Uchchabala. So we start with 0 Uchchabala. But let's say it's as retrograde as it can get, stationary as well. And let's pretend it's got 60 points of Shadbala. So now we have 0 plus 60. We add that together, we get 60. We divide it by 2, we get 30. Well, the maximum Ishta that a planet can have is 60. So that means that it's got 30% Ishta now and 30% Kashta. So half the time it's going to work well, technically, and half the time it's going to cause problems. And so that's average. It can seem like it's being canceled, the debilitation is being canceled, but this is what that principle is based on. And this is why it really honestly doesn't cancel debilitation being retrograde. It's just that the strengths, we're looking at 2 different strengths there. Now, if you have a planet that's exalted and has high Shadbala, the retrograde status, then that's a very powerful planet. If it's got 60 points of Shadbala and 60 points of Uchchabala, which we've already said, then we divide that by 2, 120 by 2, we get 60. So planet's strength, its ability to do good, is based on this combination of Uchchabala, exaltation, and Shadbala, retrograde and stationary. How close it is actually to the Earth itself. Okay, so keep that in mind. And for the retrograde, you probably will need a computer program to calculate those specific points. But if it's retrograde, just look at it as positive. Look at it as adding to the capacity of that planet. Okay. Now, other points of strength we want to look at. Kendrabala. When a planet is in an angle, it has better capacity to achieve what you might consider its goals to be, because angles are points of activation, points of action. So planets in the angles take action. That's why sometimes, I've heard it said before, that if a person comes to you and they're wanting to get a session, there's no planets and angles, that you really don't need to read their chart because they're not going to take action in positive ways. Now, I think that's a little bit harsh, and I don't think that's always true. But this works across the Rashi and all Vargas. In any Varga that you see that has no planets and angles, normally that person is not going to take as much initiative towards developing that Varga. So if it's wealth, no planets and angles, there will be somewhat of a weakness towards developing wealth. If it's marriage, no planets and angles, following one's path, committed relationships, they won't be taking initiative because the planets in the angles are going to show how we take that initiative. The more planets and angles, the more initiative we take, the more action we take, the more that particular Varga is stimulated. Digbala, this is directional strength. And these are based on the placement of the planet by house, essentially. So, for example, Sun and Mars, these two planets do very well when they are located in the southern portion of the chart, or southern portion of the sky, and that's the 10th house. A lot of people get that mixed up because you would think the south would be the 4th house, but no. The southern portion of the chart is the 10th house. So when the Sun and Mars are in the 10th, those planets get directional strength. They'll have the capacity to accomplish their goals better. Moon and Venus do well in the northern portion of the chart, which is the 4th house. And that means when Moon and Venus are in the 4th, they will have better capacity to function in lunar and Venusian ways. Saturn does well in the west. The west is the house furthest away from us. It is a Marika house which can deal with death, and according to Parashar, it's where things disappear from sight, where we lose things. And that's where the sun sets. And so Saturn does better in that part of the sky, in the western portion of the sky. You don't want Saturn too close to you, your body, which is the eastern portion in the ascendant. But Mercury and Jupiter do very well in the 1st house, which is the eastern portion of the chart. So Mercury and Jupiter get directional strength in the 1st house. Moon and Venus get directional strength in the 4th house. Saturn gets directional strength in the 7th house. Mars and Sun get directional strength in the 10th house. As Sun and Mars are moving from the 4th to the 10th, they're gaining directional strength. As they're moving from the 10th to the 4th, they're losing directional strength. Same thing with all these planets. Saturn moving from the 7th to the 1st is losing directional strength. As it moves from the 1st to the 7th, it's gaining directional strength. Jupiter and Mercury moving towards the 1st, gaining directional strength. Moving towards the 7th, losing directional strength. And this makes sense to a degree. Sun and Mars, the Sun is the king, Mars is the general. These are the planets that you want to take action, that you want to be in charge, the 10th house of the chart. Saturn, you want somewhat as far away from you as possible. You want your sorrow and suffering and delays far away from you. So when it's in the 7th, that's as far away from you as you can get. Moon and Venus are the nurturers, the ones that grow things. You want those in the 4th. That's the place where things grow from. This is our inner states of consciousness and our home. So having Moon and Venus in the 4th can be very good and comforting. Mercury and Jupiter, these are planets that promote well-being, promote self-promotion, Jupiter typically. Mercury is the planet of managing the affairs of our life. Having that in the ascendant, that's going to show the life path itself with Mercury is going to be managed well, and with Jupiter, there's going to be grace and blessings there. So these are some things that you can start thinking about in regards to the strengths of the planets, and start eyeballing them in charts. Think about the Uchchabala, the exaltational positions. Think about the Shadbala, is a planet retrograde or not? And again, that's going to be the hardest one to do without a software program, because there's going to be different degrees of that. Think about the directional strength of the planets, as we just went through. And think about if the planets are in angles. Also, if planets are in trines, that helps because that makes them function with a little more ease and a little more effortlessness, a little more grace. And as you're looking at a chart, once you figure out what the planet means and where it's placed, you'll be able to think, all right, is this planet going to function freely and effectively, or is there going to be some difficulty? Is it going to have a hard time taking action towards manifesting the things that it represents? Hopefully you've taken notes. And in the next 9 to 12 videos, we're going to be looking at each of the planets, looking at the karakas of all of the planets, looking at what the planets represent in and of themselves, and try to give you, as best as possible, a generalized overview of what it means to have the sun in a certain position in your chart, what it means to have Saturn in a certain position of your chart. The innate qualities of the planet will color that. So we'll look at the planetary qualities, and then after that we will start getting into the houses. So the planets, as we've talked about, represent the conscious energy, the innate qualities, and the houses represent the areas of life. So we're going to take the conscious energies, figure out what those are first, and then we're going to determine what the areas of life are by the houses, and hopefully that will allow us to see how they go together to give us a picture of what this person's life path is going to be like, looking at the horoscope, and how might it flow, or how might it manifest itself.